I'm very thrilled to introduce Dr. Marie Coppola. She's an assistant professor at the Departments of Psychological Sciences and Linguistics at the University of Connecticut. She's also a director for the Language Creation Lab and the Study of Language and Math, or SLAM. Marie trained at MIT and the University of Rochester, as well as the University of Chicago. All three colleges are quite prestigious, so congratulations for that. Her field is developmental psychology and cognitive science. Those are her preferences for study. She researches new and emerging sign language in Nicaragua that led her to study the impact of sign language related with numbers or numerical concepts and understanding. And she studies deaf children in the US. She is a hearing daughter of deaf parents, or CODA, child of deaf adults. I tend to get that backwards sometimes. So that experience has made her research possible and led to a passion for supporting the deaf community in the US and around the world. Marie advocates for equal access for scholars in the US, and she also she's the founding executive director for Manos Unidas, which is in English, hands together. Manos Unidas is a 501c3 nonprofit organization to encourage or increase the education of deaf children in Nicaragua. She is supported by the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, NIH. So please welcome Dr. Marie Coppola. My story begins with my parents. I could not do what I do without my parents and what they've given me as I've grown. They gave me a language and their experience. I'm thrilled that I had an opportunity to join my parents for a trip to Washington, D.C. for the class of 1966 50th celebration. It was this past fall, their 50th celebration. And many classmates showed up. It was about maybe approximately 100 students graduating in the graduating class, and around 70 of them showed up. I mean, I'm sure there are a good number that have passed on by now, but a majority showed up. Gallaudet University planned such a wonderful celebration. They had a special lunch presentation, and it was just wonderful. They gave special medals or awards for all the 50th anniversary people, those who graduated 50 years ago. Some friends of my parents came to chat with me, and one asked if I was hearing. And I said, no, I'm a CODA. I'm not completely hearing, and I'm definitely not deaf either. But really, I'm a CODA, right in the middle. I have been thrilled to be involved in the National CODA Foundation, a member of that, and I value my experiences from my parents. My identity and my research and everything has come from my raising from my parents. So I'm now 48, and I was born in 1968. ASL was just emerging and being set as an actual language, and their culture was being recognized more and more. But in my area, where I was raised. My parents were the only deaf in the area. We lived near Philly, but still, we were a little more isolated where we lived. As a little girl, I was smart, I learned quickly, and people noticed that. They would tell me, "Oh, your parents are deaf, you are smart. Maybe you could find a cure for deafness." And even at age 7 or 8, I didn't completely understand the disability label or identity or everything that was involved, but still something was not quite right about that statement or suggestion. I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I knew that I didn't think I was going to do that. Or I was told, you should become an interpreter and help deaf people. Again, that didn't really set well with me. That perspective was not the same as mine. So at that time, that seemed to be my only two options for a career. I was not interested in either. Philadelphia is a strong Catholic area. I went to a Catholic school for 12 years. I was a good little Catholic girl, most of the time, anyway. And understand, my high school was all girls, and there were about half of the teachers were nuns and half were lay teachers. They sort of had a process for our next step after high school. Majority of the girls graduated and went to college, but mostly in Philadelphia, just right there local. Maybe if they got out of Philly, they went to New Jersey, but they did not go far from home. I, on the other hand, wanted to get out and far away. I wanted to disconnect some from my family and see the big world out there. While I was a student in 7th grade, my school asked for volunteers to take the SAT, which is typically taken by high school students. So I sat, volunteered, took the SAT. It was very hard. I mean, I was 11 years old, so it was very difficult, it seemed. Well, after I took the SAT, my name was added to a list that was sold to colleges. And that was about 1983, 1984. And of course, everything was paper at that time. Nothing was online, no online systems. AOL had not yet been invented. Oh, I'm sorry, Al Gore. I have a funny story about that. About him inventing the internet. Anyhow, that went back to the point. Okay. So I had a stack of college brochures and pamphlets and had to decide what I would do with that. My high school had a detached mobile home for the guidance counselors. So I would go into this little trailer and they had kind of a card file system for future careers. They would ask some questions and then we would find the right fit for each student. I was interested and did well in math and science. I had heard a neighbor of mine, their parents were in math and science, and women could become engineers. I thought, okay, so I could get a good job as an engineer. My father worked at the post office. He graduated from Gallaudet. He got a degree in library science. And many people stay in the one job for a long time, but they don't come open often. There's a low turnover rate. So my father worked at the post office. My parents hadn't gone through the college search process, so they didn't really have a whole lot of advice to give me. I went into this guidance counselor trailer and sat with the nun. And I decided I wanted to become an engineer and help people. So I went through the cards and I found biomedical engineering. Seemed to satisfy both of my interests. Excellent. So I went back home to that huge stack of college brochures and information, and I first filtered the pile by which deadlines had not passed yet. If the deadline had passed, I put them aside. So I had a smaller pile, and I began to look for the major of biomedical engineering programs, which left 5 universities. Oh, it's a funny list, those 5 universities. MIT, a Catholic university in Washington, D.C., Lehigh University, Georgia Tech, and Drexel in Philadelphia, which was a negative to me because it was too close to home. So I applied to all 5 universities, was accepted to all 5, and MIT was quite famous for being a top engineering university, so I had not visited but went ahead and accepted. I will discuss later about my and my father's trip to a few colleges, but I was in a play, and opening weekend conflicted with the orientation and visitation weekend at MIT, so I wasn't able to join that weekend. At the end of the summer, I packed up. My parents drove me from Philadelphia to Boston, dropped me off at MIT. My family went to a Red Sox game, left me at MIT by myself. I just was sitting in my room alone. And then I got hungry, so I had to go looking for food. As I went looking for food, I noticed that students at MIT didn't seem to be the same as me. They seemed to be interested in different things. They were interested in how things worked. Maybe they would take things apart, analyze the parts, and then put it all back together. Oh, I'm out. That was not for me. I did not realize that that's what engineers did. I had no idea what engineering involved at that time. I knew it would be a good job, a good career, and it's a good goal for people in my area, but that was about it. Well, my roommate was taking Intro to Psychology, and she showed me her book. And there was one experiment called the Stroop effect. It shows the automatic process of reading, and I became fascinated with that. The next day, I changed my major. That was the first step in becoming who I am and where I am today. I was lucky because MIT at that time had a huge center for cognitive science and language acquisition. I was in the right place at the right time, and I will expand more about that later. My father's vision of the college search process was different than mine. He decided that we would drive across America and touch every state. I thought, really, Dad? My dad talks big, so I didn't think we would actually go through with this. Come on, we can't do that. My mother was involved in the ICDA, International Catholic Deaf Association. So she flew for a conference, and my dad and I was 17 at the time, as well as my brother, who is hearing. The 3 of us went on our trip. My siblings were 12 and 14. We didn't have a minivan. It was just a regular sized car. I sat in the front. Okay, my mom was, in another place, remember, she wasn't with us, so I was in the front and planning the trip. So we went from Philadelphia, we went south, and of course, my father reminded me we must touch every single state. We must drive through every single state. And I didn't think he was serious still, but it actually happened. We had the plan set to follow to be able to go through each state. It was quite a maze. There's another presentation that I do have a slide for a separate part of the story, but so we would cross the state line, and then we'd pull over and see a welcome to Oklahoma sign. We'd take a picture, and of course my father was deaf. They must have proof. You can't just tell people that you went to all 48 states. No, you have to prove it. You have to show that you went. So we had to have those pictures as proof. So the Deaf Olympics is one thing that I quite remember. I would like to find this guy. Are any of you friends or have friends in Ireland? From the audience, Mary Carol? Yes, I do have friends in Ireland. So this was the summer I was 16 and I had 1 year left of high school. But of course I was on a college tour, visiting colleges. I arrived at MIT and, as I mentioned, changed my majors pretty quickly. And I started to find my passion and what I really was interested in. I still wasn't focused on, deaf research or anything related to the deaf world. I hadn't made that connection just yet.
At that time, I was working for Steve Pinkner, and he was the lab director there. There was a graduate student named Anne Sangas. She had already gone to Nicaragua. She was looking at a new sign language that had emerged in the country. Anne invited me to go with her to help with her data collection while working on her dissertation, which for me was a great experience. We would be the only two people at that time, at MIT anyway, that knew any sign language. But I didn't have any formal training. I just grew up with deaf parents. I was more than any of you. So Anne and I went down to Nicaragua, and it was a huge change in my life. I knew at that moment that that's what I needed to spend the rest of my life doing. So I went ahead and applied to PhD programs after that trip. So Anne's sign name is a little different, right? It's from Nicaragua, and it looks like this. Well, back in the 90s, I'm sure you remember the braid tails that everyone had. The little rat tails that would kind of go down your shoulder. After a while, it's over by now. It was more of an 80s thing, but we did cut it off eventually, as you see here. I froze it for a while. I don't know where it went. Like I said, I applied to graduate school. One went to the University of Rochester because I knew that it was big on cognitive science, as well as sign language. So I applied with two mentors. The first was Lisa Newport, and the other was Ted Coppola. They had founded a Sign Language Research Center, or SLRC. And I'll show you something else in a second, but I want to share with you that the organizers asked me if I could give you all some tips, some things that I wish I had known before going to grad school. So, the first is that it's hard. It's really challenging. You feel like you're a big fish or a small fish in a big pond. There's so much to learn. I mean, for someone with a different background, I didn't know what I was getting into. And of course, I was the first person to be researching this kind of thing. And while it's unsettling, it's also really nice. There are people around you that are experts in what you're interested in learning. By the end, though, you become the expert. And that's what's nice about it. People then get to look up to you. But it's tough when you're short-sighted at first. So the big thing that I say to people is to choose a mentor wisely. Sometimes people focus on a location, a curriculum, or a program, which is just fine and good. But for a PhD, there's a special aspect of it that has to do with relationships. You have to make sure that that mentor is a good fit. And it's not about judging a person's character, it's about figuring out how you can work together. You may be motivated, but you need someone to guide you through a little bit and hold your hand as you start. If you're the kind of person that needs more support, but the mentor is more hands-off, that may not be the best fit for that student. So you have to take some time to look into different options. Now, when students email me saying they're interested in working with me or joining my lab, I respond with contact information for my students, my current students, and I tell the prospective student to have as many conversations as they'd like. Because I can tell them about who I am and what I think of myself, but they're the people that really know and really can tell other students about whether or not this decision is the best for them. So that's the biggest tidbit I can share. Now, for deaf and hard of hearing students, community may have an impact on where you decide to go. But be mindful of the fact that it is temporary. Usually, you don't stay and work in the place that you go to a PhD program in. You can find somewhere else. So just be mindful of that. Everything's temporary. So my other big word of advice, yes, PhD work is difficult. You don't decide to pursue a PhD because you don't have anything else going on. And I mean, the reason that you're all here through Bridges is to go for a PhD, yes. It's not something that you decide to wake up and do one day. You need to have that kind of drive behind you. It can be difficult going through the process. I'm fortunate in the sense that I found Nicaragua and that community. I was able to develop a research question. And just having gone to Nicaragua really opened my eyes to the possibilities around me. Their life is completely different from what I had known. So these are some of my lab mates when I had first started at the U of R. I'm sure there are a few familiar faces. So you can see Dee Dee. I'm sure many of you know Lisa and Ted. Do you know Don? He's been here a while now. Like I said before, I had no training specifically in signed language or linguistics. I had no vocabulary to assign to linguistic ideas, so it was very different to show up to this lab. In the lab meetings, we hosted them in sign language. And mind you, I left home at 17. So I moved to Rochester by 25. And during that time in between, MIT did not have a strong relationship with the deaf community. So I had to use my parents' sign skills and hope that they would transfer over to an academic setting, which was a shift. I had to take on a lot more linguistically, which was amazing as well. So this is the summer before I entered my PhD program. This is the LSA, or the Linguistic Society of America, and the LSA offers a summer institute. This year, the focus was on sign language. And I asked Lisa if I could go, and with her permission, I did. This was my first opportunity to work with other people that were interested in studying sign language. Several from Gallaudet and their linguistics department. But the group was over 60%. And there's a large group of people working within the LSA on sign language research. This was a hallmark for sign language research. So, back to that part about finding what drives you. It should be that you have a question that you want an answer to. So for me, it was figuring out how a new language came to be in Nicaragua. And a related question that became my dissertation topic was how much the structure of language a person could develop from home sign. This was a very new topic. The research done on home sign was in infancy. Susan Goldman Zachow from Chicago. Meadow. Susan Goldman Meadow from Chicago had studied many deaf children. And this was with infants using home sign, but no one had studied adults who used home sign in their everyday life. Obviously, this isn't the best situation for one's language, but in Nicaragua, these were the few opportunities. People outside of the capital city, Mosona, often had no special education opportunities or a deaf community to fall back on, which made it that much more difficult for them. So Anne and I went. We picked up a Jeep and road tripped a bit until we got to town. We would ask if there were any deaf people around. And we would get this look because we were some, white girls at the time. Anne was very young and she was very white. They would ask us why we would be driving on our own. And then we would say that we're together. We're not alone. There's more than one of us. But they meant why we were driving without men. So anywho, we would just drive around to different towns and pop the question. Sometimes people would, bring us to a farm where someone's uncle had a deaf person working there. So, we knew that people who were deaf there could communicate well enough in these farm settings. So when we got to one, we would go and meet the family, have a nice conversation, and try to talk a bit about why we would want to do research and what exactly that means. They immediately assumed that because of all the equipment we had, it was expensive and it would be filmed, and it was odd for what they knew. Most of the time, people thought that we weren't to try and help the deaf people in Nicaragua, which wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to actually learn from them and be taught as opposed to the other way around. not something I could work out too easily to the natives, but it's something that we worked on and continue to struggle with. So this was completely new to me, and it's something that I've been doing ever since. But I mean, the ethical issues that came up were completely new as well. Those kinds of challenges are something that I've tried to mediate. They have their, own IRB concerns on our end for forms and work and informed consents and all of these other aspects of research that seemed very foreign to this kind of situation. But I did my best and tried to face the questions that came. This is one of the families that has a deaf child in it. She's right on the, if you look at the guy in the top right. At that time, they didn't have any pictures of their family. So this photograph up here is a very big deal. When I was planning this presentation, I actually found this photograph and used WhatsApp to text the girl on the bottom. She was the sister in the family. It was a really amazing interaction we got to have. She said that she didn't have any other pictures with her family at that time and was very grateful for this one. I mean, I'm sure she has it in an album somewhere, but this is it. I couldn't find my favorite picture. It's one of me sitting with a shotgun. Seriously. Oh, and I wanted to add, Jessica had mentioned it. I found it this morning. We both lived on Boston Street in the 19th Ward. So the picture of me with the shotgun, what happened was I had it, and my landlord showed up one day and asked what kind of gun it was. It was one or the other. He had known. Me, on the other hand, not so much. I was like, oh, thanks for, the suggestions. You seem to know a lot more than I do about guns, but yep. There were many prospective challenges about bringing a lab to Nicaragua, as well as cameras and equipment, which of course depend on electricity. That posed its own challenge. Not having electricity or running water or bathrooms or enough food. There were a lot of complications that forced us to become inventive. I think I mentioned Susan earlier in the presentation. I got to work in her lab in the University of Chicago. So after MIT, I focused a lot more on cognitive science and language acquisition. I started my work at the University of Rochester with my focus in sign language linguistics as well as sign language structure. Following that, moving further out west, was Chicago, where I started to incorporate more gestural training into my own work, including home sign. Now, baby home sign is hard to apply to adults. Adult home sign, some of you may have seen at yesterday's presentation, is different. It's less gestural and more sign-based. So what we need to do is work with Rochester and apply this structure to gestures. So I learned from Susan how to do so, as well as including more signs and concepts for analysis, including facial expressions, as we know, is rather important. So they collected the data back in the 70s, and deaf people knew that, but the researchers were not so aware. Susan hadn't thought that she was studying sign. She was interested in kids, but wasn't always able to capture things like the face. So what we had to work with, we did. So my impact on that lab was the contribution of gestural studies and sign language studies and making that distinction as more of a gestural study.
During my time at the University of Chicago, I worked with 2 students and we discussed quite a bit about the challenges in Nicaragua. And we didn't want to benefit from their deprivation. It didn't feel right to me. And we wanted to figure out how we could give back to the Nicaraguan community. We founded a nonprofit organization, Manos Unidas, or Hands Together. And the goal was to encourage access to education and language for deaf people in Nicaragua. We have several projects. One, we support a high school interpreting program. 5% of deaf individuals are fortunate enough to go to school at all. And really it's more limited to elementary school up to the 6th or 7th grade. Really it's like 6th, 7th grade, but they're 17 or 18 years old at the time they get to 6th or 7th grade. And once they're at a max age, they have to leave. Some go on to high school. One particular city has a good program for interpreting, and that's just one program. The rest of the country has no interpreting programs. So Hands Together, or Manos Unidos, decided to help establish some programs. There's one about 2 hours north. It's in a very large area and serves a variety of deaf students who want to go to high school. We have a second project, which is a rural sign language program to teach families with deaf members of their family. It's basic sign language taught to these individuals. We have a third project that supports deaf students that go to a deaf school, a very fully sign language education. They may not have access to any type of education in their area, so they might want to go to this deaf school and be immersed. Puerto Rico is the name of the town. Ciudad. And the name of the school is the home school, in Spanish though. Before, they previously were able to have 47 or 42 students. I think then they had about 35 students. They do have a dorm, a boys and girls dorm separately. Now there are only 7 students. The population of the students there has dropped. It seems the idea of inclusive education has also taken over the country of Nicaragua. They learned from us in America. So now they're spread out, they're sent back to their local communities with no other deaf individuals or no deaf education. Their idea, the country's idea is to, send them to school, but they have no special accommodations. And we can definitely discuss more about that later. But we are trying to, Manos Unidos is trying to get more sponsors and more individuals to help us with this. So if you're interested in that work, please see me after the presentation. And the girl you see here is with her mother and grandmother. They are involved in the Rural Sign Language Program. Alsace. With Alsace is the name of the program in Spanish. There were no deaf individuals, so we had to come up with some signs here. So that's what we came up with, Alsace. The girl didn't live in the town. She lived up on a mountain with her family, and she would commute back and forth. It's a 3-hour walk one way. So during this program, someone in her family would walk with the young lady 3 hours one way. They would come, they would join the group, they would sign, they would have, tortilla and rice, and they would have a snack, and then they would walk the 3 hours back home. I've spoken with many parents of deaf children, and we offer grants and financial support and funding for them. I mean, some of them live 4 or 5 hours away by bus. Most of the parents would deny this assistance, and it was difficult for me to convince them otherwise. We would film students and their parents in their school environment. And most of them were farmers. The parents were farmers, had no education. And they would talk about, one of their children, or, my daughter is not disabled. She just needs opportunities. And I was just shocked that the parents would figure that out for themselves. But they did, and it was amazing to me. We filmed that conversation and showed other parents that these parents, even with no education, still believe that their children can do better. And they want, many students stay home to support their family, and that's what their family needs. So it's very difficult. It's a hard balance. Many families want to protect their deaf children, and they want to keep them near forever. I know it's a tough situation for parents to be in. So we could use your help with this effort. So the family I was mentioning understood it completely, that their daughter just needed to be provided with the resources to succeed. She was 12 when we first were introduced to her, and she's still studying today. So what do we do after that? If we go to Alsace and there are no deaf individuals there anymore.
This is what my lab looks like now. And like I said before, I'm very particular about including deaf people in my research. I've had the opportunity to mentor and will. One thing that I always share with students, typically for younger students, but anyone in this room can take this advice: you can change the world. And you should change the world, right? So yeah, I'll leave you with that. Oh, one more thing. So one change at the University of Connecticut as a result of my continued awards. Usually you have to do it in a financial way. Of course, I do the work, but when you get the money, it definitely helps on the administrative end of things. They don't want NSF to complain that I could not conduct my research because the university refused to provide accessible services to deaf students. I try to say it more positively, but if that's the frame I have to go with, that's what gets the message across. So it's important to use your positions of power to advocate. There won't be more deaf researchers without more access. In Nicaragua, you have to provide the opportunities for access to education in order to provide language. Whereas here in the States, you have to provide language access to education at the graduate level, that is. So things kind of flip. It's critical. Now I'm done. Thank you very much.